The following podcast is an exclusive presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Hey folks, Brian Keene here. You know, summer's over. We're entering the fall and then the winter. Halloween's coming up, Thanksgiving, and then, of course, the holiday shopping season. Speaking of the holiday shopping season, let me tell you about subculturecorsets.com. They've got everything you need for everyone on your list for this holiday season. Clothing, accessories, gifts, books, you name it, they've got it. They sponsor every show on the Project Entertainment Network, including this one. So please give them your business. Visit subculturecorsets.com.
Three Guys with Beards, the Project Entertainment Network store, featuring t-shirts, mugs, stickers, hoodies and more from your favorite Project Entertainment Network podcasts.
Ink stains, Scribbler's Rest.
The Horror Show with Brian Keene. Why not show your loyalty by wearing a cool product from the podcast group and show off to your friends?
It Cooks.
Armcast.
The Mondo Method Monster Attack.
Necrocastical. Go to projectentertainmentnetwork.com and click on the store tab for more details.
The Liars Club Podcast. Pizan.
The Lunch Ladies Book Club.
Matters of Faith.
The Project Entertainment Network store, stacked with stuff from the best podcasts on the internet. The Curtain Jerkers.
Buttercup of Doom.
www.projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
There shall come a podcast like no other. Defenders Dialogue with Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Marvel Comics' original superhero non-team convenes once again. The Incredible Hulk, the Savage Submariner, the Master of the Mystic Arts, Doctor Strange, and a dynamic supporting cast of Marvel superheroes battle against evil as the Defenders. Without further ado, true believers, here's your hosts, Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Excelsior!
Welcome back to Defenders Dialogue. I'm Brian Keene.
And I'm Christopher Golden.
And this week's show is brought to you by Night Moves, the new short story collection by the queen of cosmic horror, Mary Sangiovanni, featuring 7 short stories and 2 novellas by the woman Cemetery Dance calls one of the finest purveyors of weird horror in the business. Night Moves will appeal to fans of Thomas Ligotti and Laird Barron's cosmic horror. Night Moves is available right now in paperback and ebook, and we thank Mary and her publisher for sponsoring this week's show. Our first official commercial sponsor, Chris.
I'm excited that Mary's book is our first commercial sponsor. I can't even speak. As usual, I start every show with this inability to do anything but babble. But I also want to say she's not just the queen of cosmic horror. I think she's the queen of horror.
Oh, absolutely.
And the queen of your world, we know.
Yeah, I mean, look, I may be biased. I happen to be in a romantic relationship with her, but yeah, I this has nothing to do with Defenders, but you know what? Fuck that. It's our show, and we get to talk about what we want. It's interesting to me. You, myself, every one of our peers that is our age, we've taken on these mentorship roles over the last few years, and in many cases, it's readers who were perhaps, it's writers who were perhaps reading our work, in high school or in college.
Right.
And it's really interesting to see Mary hearing that from the writers she's mentoring, Summer Cannon or Amber Fallon or, some of these other writers. They're like, I was reading your leisure novels in my senior year in high school, and it tickles her to no end, and it tickles me to see her react to that.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And it is a good segue actually, because we spend a lot of time on this show, and I don't want to, to burn a lot of time talking about non-Defenders topics, but we do spend a lot of time on the show sort of talking about how influential these writers of these stories have been on us.
Absolutely.
And so it is interesting to see, anytime you hear that sort of thing from anybody. And yeah, it's great. I'm glad that Mary's getting that because she totally deserves it.
Agreed.
But anyway, all right. So Excelsior, my friend.
Excelsior, my fellow true believer. This week, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to focus on Defenders issues 7 through 11 and Avengers issues 115 to 118. Is that correct?
That is correct. And that is because we need to get through the legendary Avengers, Defenders War, Defenders, Avengers War, however we want to say it. Although, of course, the mastermind behind the whole thing, Steve Englehart, wanted it to be the clash, not the war. He preferred the word clash, but of course, war is sexier. So that's what it became. But we start with Defenders number 7, which is subtitled "War Below the Waves."
Yep.
And it'll be interesting to see as we go on, once Namor eventually leaves the group, how few times Atlantis shows up in the stories. But this issue was written by Steve Englehart and scripted only the first 10 pages of the issue, and Len Wein, the late Len Wein, scripted the rest of the issue. Sal Buscema once again on art. It's interesting to me that the way that they broke it up, and it's important to the overall arc of this story, because it's when Hawkeye becomes a member of the Defenders, and most people will not even remember that he was a member. But
exactly, it goes back to what we said, I think, in episode 1. Literally anybody could show up in the pages of the Defenders.
Exactly.
You probably weren't going to see MODOK show up in an issue of, I don't know, the Fantastic Four, because MODOK was primarily known as an Iron Man or Captain America villain. You weren't going to see Doctor Doom taking on Werewolf by Night, for example. He was a Fantastic Four villain. But the Defenders, not only could any superhero show up, any villain could show up as well. And Hawkeye is a fantastic example of this,
Right. It's the beginning of that, too, because prior to this, it had been the sort of core characters, Silver Surfer, Submariner, Doctor Strange, Hulk, and then Valkyrie, who was invented for this series. But starting with this issue with Hawkeye, you see this idea that basically, essentially any Marvel character who's not being currently used elsewhere can show up and will show up and become a member of this team. Yep.
What's interesting, rereading this, I had forgotten just how much of a dick Hawkeye was back in the 70s.
Yeah. Hawkeye to me is like, and again, so since we're talking about this series from the 70s, I think it's okay to use this. Hawkeye is Larry, the guy who lived downstairs from Jack and Chrissy and Janet in Three's Company. He's that guy. He's like, he thinks he's cool, but he's actually a dick.
Yep.
But yeah, so anyway, so we open with the Hulk beating up Hawkeye for no apparent reason. Hawkeye being being a loudmouth and shooting an arrow at the Hulk as the Hulk is walking away and not killing him.
Right.
It's and then realizing this is perhaps a bad idea.
Yeah, Hulk is trying to take it easy on him. He throws him into these trash cans in an alley and he walks away. He's done. And you nailed it. Hawkeye has to run his mouth. He has to be a badass. And Hulk turns around. He says, "You don't listen to Hulk. No one listens to Hulk."
Yep.
Hulk is sick of it.
I think we're seeing a theme here. We just that's my favorite bit of, and I will say that we get to right now literally one of my favorite panels of the Hulk ever, because Valkyrie shows up with Namor and basically wants to stop Hawkeye and the Hulk from whatever's going on here. And she punches Hawkeye, "Stop hounding the Hulk." And she punches him so hard he flies across the alley. And Hulk, with this hand on his head, says, Purple Man was fighting Hulk. Now he fights other humans instead. Hulk doesn't understand. And then we have the panel. But for once, Hulk thinks that's funny. Let humans fight. Hulk will watch. And then Hulk is sitting in the alley, sitting on his ass, laughing his butt off. And it's the best panel ever.
Yep, it is. I agree. It is. The Defenders, the entire series, there are so many wonderful Hulk moments, but this is definitely in the top 5. But yeah, we've talked on previous shows, Marvel of the 60s and the 70s. These characters it's not like today where they all know each other and they're all in each other's books. For many times, they were meeting each other for the first time in these crossovers.
Yep.
And
that's one of the best things about going back to look at this stuff.
Yeah, invariably, it would always lead to a misunderstanding and then a fight. And then after they were done fighting, they would make up, which is what happens here. Namor and Valkyrie tell Hawkeye about the Defenders, and he comes along with them back to Doctor Strange's house.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, I know we have a lot of issues to cover, but so we just should set up. Basically what happened is that Hawkeye, as a member of the Avengers, was, as he put it, was putting the moves on the Scarlet Witch.
Right.
And she blew him off for the Vision, so he left. He quit the Avengers over that, went to try to hook up with his ex-girlfriend, Black Widow, and ended up getting his ass kicked by Daredevil. And then the Avengers invited Daredevil to join the Avengers, even though Hawkeye had quit over Scarlet Witch. And now Hawkeye is basically a loser with nowhere to go. And he essentially joins together with the Defenders. They go back to Doctor Strange's house, and then they're immediately interrupted by an Atlantean who announces that Atuma, the Atlantean bad guy who had something to do with the death of Submariner's wife, Dorma, is coming, and then they're all going to go fight him. And other than that, to me, the issue doesn't have. There's some great visuals with Atuma and all that stuff, and but there's not a whole lot to recommend the issue other than the fight with giant crabs.
There's two other things I would touch on though. First of all, the appearance of the supervillain Red Ghost. Once again, it solidifies anything can happen in the Defenders, because the Red Ghost. He's primarily a Fantastic Four villain. Right. He's fought Iron Man, but primarily he's Reed Richards' foe.
Right.
Now he's showing up in the Defenders,
working with Atuma.
Yeah. The other thing I found interesting. Now we've talked on our previous episodes about how everybody mistreats the Hulk. Not so much Valkyrie, but Doctor Strange, Namor, Silver Surfer. All three of them have been just colossal douchebags to the Hulk at one moment or another in this book. And issue 7 is notable for, when Atuma shows up and captures Hawkeye and Valkyrie and Namor, what does Hulk do? He decides, I've had enough of this.
Yeah.
Atuma shows up at his water ship, and Hulk says, Hulk knows this thing. It is a water ship. Hulk has been on a water ship. Hulk has been prisoner on a water ship run by strange little man, talking about Atuma.
Yeah.
Didn't like it. And then Hulk leaves. He abandons these people who have been shitty to him and just leaves.
That's to me, that is one of the best parts of the issue. And I agree though with Red Ghost showing up, it is this sense of craziness, but also there's a point at which Red Ghost is now not controlling super apes; he's controlling giant killer crabs, and at one point, and other sea creatures. And at one point, Namor says something like, "Were it not for your perfidious porpoises." That's all you need to know about this issue. Is that the Red Ghost is apparently controlling perfidious porpoises.
Well, and at the end, he's controlling Namor, which takes us into issue number 8.
Right.
Yep.
Also, fully written by Engelhardt, drawn by Buscema and Frank McLaughlin on inks. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, it basically opens with a great classic fight scene. Namor is being mind controlled by Red Ghost, and Valkyrie and Hawkeye have to face off against him. Now, we've seen Valkyrie in action in the Defenders, but this is her first really, really big chance for the creators to really showcase her power set. Namor, people forget he's one of the strongest characters in the Marvel universe. Right. I mean, he can hold his own against Juggernaut, Hulk, Thor, etc. And here's Valkyrie basically having to fight him, while Hawkeye's firing little sticks, little trick arrows.
Because that'll work.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Namor does win, and Valkyrie and Hawkeye are then captured by Red Ghost as well.
Yeah, and then it's really interesting because you have this thing, and again, we're not so focused on these two issues, although they are entertaining. But then you have this thing where Doctor Strange, has figured out some way to make progress in undoing the spell that made the Black Knight turn to stone, the Enchantress's spell that turned him to stone.
Right.
And then he's like, hey, Clea and Wong, I need to get in touch with the other defenders. So he reaches out to summon them and summons the Silver Surfer and summons the Hulk, who then blew off the others. And they show up and none of the others respond. So it's Hulk who says, well, shit, I know where they are.
Hulk knows where Fishman and Thor are.
I know where I left them to be killed by the Red Ghost at Atuma.
And for once, Doctor Strange gets his comeuppance. We've covered in previous episodes, he's been a dick to Hulk. He's trying to change that. We've started to see the progression of their relationship. But Hulk is not letting bygones be bygones. Doctor Strange is like, you know where they are, then tell us. Set our minds at rest. Hulk says, why should Hulk do anything dumb magician wants? Hulk shouldn't have come here in the first place and is leaving now. And once again, these teammates end up fighting. Silver Surfer and Hulk are wrestling around. And Doctor Strange puts the Hulk to sleep.
Right. Well, yeah. And basically entrances him and makes him tell Doctor Strange and Silver Surfer where to find the others.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. That's your solution, Doctor Strange.
Yep. The rest of the issue,
instead of just trying to be kind and soothe the Hulk's hurt feelings, you're like, screw that guy.
But that's going to come back to bite him at the end of the issue. We have of course, as you might expect, Doctor Strange and Silver Surfer, they go to Atuma's ship. They confront the Red Ghost in Atuma. They free Namor from his mind control. They free Valkyrie and Hawkeye. They win the day. But then there's a little epilogue to this issue, dealing with the Black Knight. And before we get to that, though, we should mention very briefly, the same month this comic would have been out on the newsstand, Avengers issue number 115 was out.
Right.
And that had an epilogue as well, in which Loki, the half-brother of Thor, who you younger listeners probably know from the movies, and Dormammu, Doctor Strange's big bad guy, are forming an alliance. What they're going to do, they want this device called the Evil Eye. And what the Evil Eye does, it can expand Dormammu's dimension, which will somehow allow him to conquer Earth. So,
in other words, it's what we call a MacGuffin.
Yeah, exactly. Kids like ourselves, that month we buy Avengers 115. We see this. Now let's go back to Defenders issue number 8. The end of that issue, the whole team with new member Hawkeye, they get back to Doctor Strange's house. And Hulk is still asleep. He's still in the trance they left him in.
Right.
They're talking about how to free Black Knight, how to turn him from stone. And the Hulk is resentful. He thinks to himself, Magician and Silverface made Hulk sleep. Nobody can make Hulk do anything and not get hurt. But he pauses. Black Knight helped Hulk once, so Hulk will wait to see if Magician can fix him. So even as they're trying to be kinder to Hulk in their fashion, Hulk, he has a long memory. He's not letting these things pass.
Right. Yeah. He's stewing. He's stewing. So let's talk. Let's just say. So first of all, I find it fascinating. I always find this interesting that you and I grew up in different parts of the country, not too far away from each other. But maybe it's that. But maybe it's also this thing where you always, even now, my sons will say a word, and it's always interesting to know that someone only knows a word by reading it.
Yeah.
And we come across that with all these character pronunciations, right?
Right.
I remember two Marvel editors that are old friends of mine. When they were Marvel editors, we were out to lunch. Evan Skolnick and Glenn Greenberg were arguing over the pronunciation of Magneto, and which obviously is Magneto. But I say Dormammu. And there are other characters we pronounce differently, but suffice to say, we're both right because they're made-up words.
How did they pronounce him in the Doctor Strange movie? I don't remember.
I don't remember either. I don't remember either.
Okay,
and you say Namor, and I say Namor.
Here's the clincher: Kazar or Kazar?
Fuck Kazar, of course.
Kazar. Okay, we agree on that then.
Yeah, Kazar is just dumb.
I've heard comic creators pronounce him Kazar though.
Really?
Yeah, I pitched Marvel a Kazar miniseries back in the day. It would have been for their Max line, and the editor kept pronouncing him Kazar. And I, not to tell you your business, you're employed by Marvel, but I think you're pronouncing that wrong.
All right. Anyway, so we have Loki, and Loki is now blinded. And so he wants to get his eyesight back, and he thinks that if he helps Dormammu get the evil eye, Dormammu will use that power. He's promised that he will get Loki his eyesight back. So
right.
So Loki has sort of promised to help him. Meanwhile, Doctor Strange is trying to figure out how he can save the Black Knight and turn him back to human, and he reaches out to him like astrally in this. He finds his spirit. He locates his spirit in this, limbo realm. And when he does that, somehow Dormammu's able to interfere with this transmission and to change the Black Knight's message back to Doctor Strange. Basically telling Doctor Strange that he needs to find the evil eye, because only with that can he get the Black Knight no longer stone, and that leads to the whole Avengers Defenders clash.
Right. Now, in this era of an event series every 4 months, and not just
every
Marvel,
month,
every month, yeah, DC does it too. What our younger listeners might not understand, this was the first big comic book event crossover. I mean, yes, Marvel continuity-wise, what happened in one book would impact other books, but this was the first time that the company ever did, such a big event like this.
A big multi-issue, more than one series, crossover with all of these characters. Yeah, it's definitely the first one. And what's really interesting, though, about it is if you go back and you look at this, and this is no offense to Englehart, who wrote both Avengers and Defenders at the time. The Avengers issue, I'm trying to see who drew it. I love the art, but I can't see who drew it at the moment.
Avengers 116 was...
Bob Brown. Bob Brown was the artist. But what's interesting to note, and as I said, no offense to Steve Englehart, but the way that these things were done at the time, partly I think because he was writing 2 issues a month of massive superhero action, is let me figure out the easiest way to now, I have 30 characters or 25 characters, let me break them up into the smallest groups I can, so that I can tell just snippets of this story. I have this few pages for these characters to meet, and so rather than have a very deeply plotted, story where all these characters are interacting together, it was, divide and conquer.
Right. And, as a creator, what fascinates me, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, during the writing of this, from Defenders issue 7 up through, I guess, the end of the Avengers Defenders War, Englehart was in the process of moving from Connecticut to California.
Right.
Now that's a hard trip today, but this was the 70s. This was the early 70s. It was an even a harder trip back then.
Right.
And he, he gets out there. He has to find a house. He has to buy the house. He has to get all his stuff moved out there. Back then they didn't have the internet. So, he's mailing these things in, these scripts in. It's a testament to him how well this entire crossover works.
Right.
But yes, as a writer, as a creator, you can see the shortcuts he took to make it easier on himself.
Right. But it wasn't just him. I mean, even after this pattern was followed so many times when you had teams clash for decades, basically.
Yep.
Go ahead.
It worked.
Yeah, it did work. And the thing is, look, at the end of the day, and as we go forward going through this, because it's not going to take as long as it would normally take, I think, but as we can see going through this, what we wanted as fans reading these comics was to see these characters fight each other.
Right.
Right? I mean, that's all we wanted from it, in that era. So anyway, so we begin in Avengers, with them being like, what's happening? They're in Sanctum Sanctorum of Doctor Strange.
Yeah, they show up at Doctor Strange's
right.
house. Thor knocks on the door very politely with his hammer, and it triggers. Basically, it's Doctor Strange's burglar alarm. Basically
right.
They're all flung up into the sky by an unseen supernatural force, and Thor does not take well to this, and he bangs on the door more insistently. At which point, Doctor Strange's second burglar alarm, his faithful manservant Wong. Those are not my words. Those are the words they used in the 70s. Okay,
yes, yep.
Wong was his manservant, and I should say later, especially during J.M. DeMatteis's run, Wong really comes into his own as
Absolutely.
a full defender. But Wong answers the door, and it's two very simple panels, but he shuts down Thor, shuts down the Avengers, slams the door in their face, says, "Good day, sir," slams the door in the son of Odin's face, and
good day,
Thor,
sir.
Yeah, Thor does not take to that well at all. He smashes the door down with his hammer. And then Wong decides he's going to take on all the Avengers.
All the Avengers, yeah. It's Wong alone. If mystical warnings and conversation will not stop your intrusion, Wong shall. And he gets into his fighting pose. And I just thought that was the greatest thing ever. It's like Wong by himself is going to kick the asses of the entire Avengers squad. I wish that we'd seen that actual fight, but
I would read the shit out of that every month.
All right. So anyway, then we get the recap of what Dormammu and Loki are trying to do, and we get a history of the Evil Eye and where we saw it last, which is with Johnny Storm. So we get flashbacks to that and Wyatt Wingfoot and all this other sort of history of it that ends up with
history.
The Evil Eye broken up into to 6 parts and scattered all over the parts are scattered all over the world. Which is, again, the classic contest of champions. Like, how do we get the characters to all sort of be broken up? Is we have a MacGuffin that's broken up into a bunch of multiple parts and scattered all over that then we have to send people to chase and recover.
Right.
This is a thing that has been done a million times. But it works perfectly in that sense because then you have to... And then what becomes interesting here, and what's great about the Masterworks is you have Englehart's introduction where he talks about why he chose the characters he chose, is how he decided who was going to fight whom, and sends them off sort of broken up together. And then we also get Loki realizing that he's been an idiot, of course, and that Dormammu's not going to give him what he wants. And
right.
So he decides that he needs to add a little Loki-ness to this story.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yep. Well, yeah, and right before that happens, one thing I want to point out.
Yeah.
When Doctor Strange is sending the 6 defenders off to search for the pieces of the Evil Eye, we finally have a breakthrough in relations between the Hulk
Oh yeah, yep.
and the rest of the Defenders. Namor says to him, "The Silver Surfer and I shall fly to the furthest shores. Hulk, we understand your animosity toward many of us, but for the Knight's sake, you must also help us." And Hulk agrees. Yes, Hulk will do it. This is finally, one of the key members of the team admitting, Hulk, we've been colossal douchebags to you.
That almost feels like it should have been the title of the series for a while.
But yeah, that Loki shows up at Avengers Mansion, and he engages in his trickery. Basically, he gets the Defenders thinking he gets the Avengers thinking that the Defenders are up to nefarious, plans, seeking out the pieces of the evil eye.
Right. Which is interesting. I found that scene really interesting because Loki doesn't even have to do much by way of manipulation because he's saying, hey, Doctor Strange is kind of, suspicious because it's all the magic stuff. Valkyrie, as far as the Avengers know, the only time that a character looking looking like this character and under that name has appeared, she was a villain. The Hulk is traditionally seen as a lot of trouble, if not villainous. Submariner has been a villain. Silver Surfer, there's a case to be made about that. And Hawkeye, although he was an Avenger, was previously a villain. So for Loki to say, hey, listen, this group are really suspicious and they're doing this thing, it's not that much of a distance for the Avengers to travel to think that could be true.
Exactly. And, it occurs to me, for the listeners, we should probably just very quickly touch on which Avengers lineup this is. This is the almost classic lineup. It's Captain America, Iron Man, Black Panther, Thor, Scarlet Witch, Vision, Mantis, who our younger listeners will know, of course, from Guardians of the Galaxy 2.
Right.
And the Swordsman, who I never really cared about the Swordsman. To me, he was a low rent version of the Black Knight.
Yeah, absolutely. The Swordsman is that, and I shouldn't even say this, but the Swordsman is that guy who always kind of follows around your group at a convention.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, you have your group of friends who you really like, who you're really happy to see when you get to a convention, and that you go to meals and stuff like that, and there's always that one guy who, thinks he's friends with the group and wants to... and that's the Swordsman. Or it's like, because he's sort of dating Mantis, it's like Mantis is part of the group, and this is her new boyfriend, and he's like, I'm just hanging out here, and he doesn't fit in at all. He doesn't have any powers, the Swordsman, except he's a good swordsman. And he's really arrogant. He's based on the sort of Errol Flynn, classic actor who, Englehart would have grown up. I mean, obviously he's not, but, watching those movies.
Right.
So that's where that character comes from. So, I know I'm going to get such a pile of crap for that, but I don't care.
But no, that's the perfect description of it. So the second half of the issue, it's basically the first of these clashes. And on the Defenders side, we have the Silver Surfer. And in the Avengers corner, we have the Vision and the Scarlet Witch. It is worth noting, these days, those two are very much their own characters. But 70s Marvel, this is where their romance was first blossoming. And, Scarlet Witch had started out a villain. She was still relatively new as a superhero, and Vision was still a relatively new character. So it was never just Scarlet Witch fights somebody or Vision fights somebody. It was always the two of them had to fight somebody together.
Right. And we should, at some point far down the line, we should really do the two Vision and Scarlet Witch, the miniseries and maxi series, because those are really interesting. Like, it's such an interesting pairing. You don't get to see much of it in this story, but it is an interesting pairing. It was an interesting choice that they made at the time.
Agreed.
Anyway, So we have the Silver Surfer showing up, in the tropics, looking for his piece of the evil eye. And he's searched the whole island, and the one place he hasn't searched is the volcano.
Of course.
Why would you look inside the burning volcano? And his entering the volcano causes a small eruption. So when the Vision and Scarlet Witch show up, they think that the Silver Surfer is purposely causing this eruption, to do horrible things. He's striking out at mankind, according to the Scarlet Witch. And then when it sort of blows up, the Vision thinks that the Silver Surfer has attacked the Scarlet Witch. And although he's, like Spock, intended to be emotionless, we know that, like Spock, that's not true. And the Vision goes apeshit!
Absolutely. It ends with him and Surfer in the lava, fighting in the lava for the evil eye.
Which is pretty damn cool.
Yeah, it's very cool, But then, of course, Scarlet Witch is in the path of the lava, and, Vision gives up the fight to go save the woman he loves, and the Defenders win this round. Silver Surfer escapes with the first part of the evil eye.
And it should be noted, by the way, that Silver Surfer in this issue is drawn in a great Kirby, imitation. That's the best way to say it. Very Kirby-esque. Which leads to Defenders 9, and we just continue. I mean, we'll tell you what issues these all are, but we're just going boom boom through the various matchups with to the best part.
Right. Defenders 9, the cover, it's one of those classic, Bronze Age Marvel covers. Look out, Iron Man, Hawkeye's got friends. And you see Hulk, Namor, and Doctor Strange leaping into the fray as Iron Man is just about to pulverize Hawkeye. And Hawkeye's explaining to him through the magic of word balloons, because word balloons back then, you could read the entirety of War and Peace in the midst of one punch being thrown.
Absolutely. And you had dialogue on the covers of comics.
Yeah, and Hawkeye's explaining, I'm not an Avenger anymore. I'm a Defender, making it official. He's now a member of the Defenders. But yeah, we open with Silver Surfer returning to Doctor Strange's house with that piece of the evil eye. And, we go through the backstory a little bit, the MacGuffin for people who may have missed that issue of the Avengers. And then it leads right into our second matchup, the Invincible Iron Man versus Hawkeye the Archer.
Which again, it's great because obviously, Iron Man versus Hawkeye should not be any fight whatsoever, but it's the two most arrogant guys. It's like, let's take the two most arrogant guys, which is great.
Right.
But that scene, chapter 5, actually opens with Valkyrie arriving on her horse Aragorn with Hawkeye on the back.
Right. And they're in someplace in South America. I don't think it ever says exactly where they are.
When they showed where the 6 pieces went, it showed all of the locations, but I don't think it lists it here.
Yeah. I did find something interesting as far as Valkyrie's backstory. And again, later episodes, especially J.M. DeMatteis's run, we will really get into Valkyrie finding her true self. But they're in South America, and the folks there are speaking Spanish, and Valkyrie is confused by it. She says, being created as an English-speaking entity leaves me out in the cold when it comes to other languages.
Yeah, I love that. And which you can also read, no offense to Steve, as being created by an English-speaking entity.
Exactly.
So I don't want to have to do research. Yeah, no, it was great. I think there's also this great thing where Hawkeye once again shows himself to be a total pig, like this guy who thinks that he's the dearly departed now. Not dearly departed, screw the guy. Hugh Hefner. Again, I'm just pissing people off right and left today. But he thinks he's like this playboy, and Valkyrie calls him Hawkeye. Valkyrie craves action, Hawkeye. Make it Clint, Val. And I crave action too. Catch my drift? And he then sexually assaults her. He grabs her and kisses her. And she...
But you have to read it in that smarmy voice. The Valkyrie craves action, Hawkeye. Make it Clint, Val. And I crave action too. Catch my drift. And then, grabs her, forces her into this embrace, and kisses her, and Valkyrie responds, male chauvinist pig, draws her sword and goes at him.
Swings for him.
But then she admits as she flies off that she can't honestly say it wasn't completely unpleasant.
That it was completely unpleasant, in a thought balloon. And it's just like, oh no. But, in any case, that's the 70s for you. We're back to the Three's Company comparisons at this point. Anyway, so then Hawkeye sees Iron Man flying, realizes, of course, that they're probably out for the same thing. Hawkeye goes to talk to this professor, who says, yes, Senor, I have been studying a device such as you describe. So it's handily, the guy Iron Man goes to ask about the thing has already gotten it, and hands it to him, and then Hawkeye shoots a trick arrow that grabs it and takes it away, leading to their fight.
Right. And this is a fight that is a long time coming. I mean, these two had an animosity towards each other dating back to, Hawkeye first joining the Avengers. Tony Stark, he's the biggest alpha male in the room.
Right.
And Clint Barton, Hawkeye, would like to be that alpha male. So, it's kind of like when Weston Oakes and I get together. And I can say that with some authority. I've known Weston over 20 years. He's one of my dearest, closest friends. But you put us together at a party too long and we start fucking with each other. It's just what we do. We both admit it. So, and I know Weston, big fan of the Defenders, a listener to this podcast. And Weston, if you're listening right now, I bet you rereading this issue, it reminded you of you and me, just as it did me. The interplay between Iron Man and Hawkeye. It's just, been there, done that.
Well, now I need to see you guys reenact this scene. Well, in any case, and then Iron Man disintegrates Hawkeye's shaft. And since we're talking about you and Weston, I'll leave that there. Hawkeye actually has that piece of dialogue, but then
Brian
Iron Man
craves action. So does Weston.
Yeah, Iron Man then because he wants to be gentle with Hawkeye, says, "My repulsor rays will back you up against the building and hold you there, so I can lightly knock you out." And Hawkeye says, "You bum." But of course, there's an accident. Hawkeye shoots an arrow that causes Iron Man's repulsor rays to knock a piece of building over, and Iron Man goes to save the innocent civilians who are in danger. And then when Iron Man turns around, Hawkeye is gone. So it's now 2-0 in favor of the
That's
Defenders.
right. For those keeping score, 2 parts of the evil eye fall to the Defenders. That's a direct quote from the comic book, by the way. Which leads us to our third matchup, which is Doctor Strange versus the Black Panther and Mantis.
I found this really interesting in reading Englehart's introduction. I loved this because this is the way writers work, right? He had his list of characters, and he did his character A goes with character X on the other side, and character B goes with character W on the other side. That these make sense. And basically, at the end of choosing teams, Doctor Strange versus Black Panther and Mantis were all he had left. So he's like, oh, screw it. Whatever, we'll just,
Well, it's a really odd pairing because, Doctor Strange, he can't fight. He's not a physical guy. He relies on sorcery and magic.
But this is one of my favorite moments because of that. Because it's like, let's have and this is the kind of thing, Doctor Strange versus Black Panther and Mantis, that would only happen in the Defenders.
Exactly.
Right.
You would not have seen this in Black Panther's solo book.
Right.
Mantis, of course, she didn't have a solo book back then. These days, she's with Guardians of the Galaxy, but you wouldn't see this in modern day Guardians of the Galaxy either. This could have only happened in the Defenders.
Right.
You're
in a cornfield somewhere in the Midwest.
In Indiana. Yeah.
In Indiana. There you go.
So yeah, you've got Doctor Strange, a master of the mystic arts, versus Black Panther, who, he's a very physical character,
Yep.
and Mantis, who knows space karate.
And there's no karate like space karate. Yeah. You know what? I want to take a moment though here as an aside. We've got a lot of joking around. We're having a really good time with this. There is a moment here that I thought was really interesting.
What's that?
And pertinent to 2017. The Black Panther and Mantis emerge from the cornfield, and there are a bunch of Indianans out by the road. One guy says, "Glory be, you can't be. That is, I heard that over to Chicago there was a cat person, but it was a she." And Black Panther says, "I imagine Spider-Man has the same problem with the Black Widow." "No, sir, I am the Black Panther." And this other guy goes, "But Black Panther?" Because in these days, the Black Panthers were militant civil rights activists. And I don't say militant in a bad way, but they had a lot of white people were afraid of them. Let's just
They were viewed back then the way, I guess the equivalent these days would be the way some Americans view Antifa.
Right.
Yeah.
And Mantis says, "Have no fear. He is with the Avengers. We wish only to know the direction the other stranger chose." So again, like I came upon that and I was like, wow. I mean, it's just like you could teach an entire class about civil rights based on that one panel. But anyway.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. So then they're looking for Doctor Strange, and Doctor Strange has disguised himself as an old lady about to get on a bus. He's cast a magical glamour spell to disguise himself as an old lady to avoid having to fight Black Panther and Mantis.
And in the middle of this main street in a small Indiana town, the townspeople see Mantis run up and use a space karate kick on this seemingly old lady.
Right. So then you do have this idea, and this is the thing about how you have these characters whose fight, like, how do you do this? Doctor Strange has his part of the evil eye. He's flying away in the middle of, above Indiana, but the Black Panther jumps from the ground to a tractor to a water tower, and then from the water tower he leaps high enough to smash into Doctor Strange, and they fight in midair. Black Panther is falling to his death, and Doctor Strange basically has to save him.
Right. Which he does begrudgingly. He does say, "I have no desire to kill him."
Yep.
But yeah, Doctor Strange he saves Black Panther, and before either of them can do anything else, Black Panther recovers and pow, starts beating the shit out of Doctor Strange again. Which then once again ties into something else that we're struggling with in society right now: gun rights and gun ownership.
Yeah.
Because you got this Indiana guy. "What's going on in my backyard?" And he looks out, he sees Black Panther and Doctor Strange going at it, and he says, "Two maniacs tearing up my property. Well, the farm's posted with no trespassing. They were warned. Now they could taste some buckshot." And he opens fire on them both.
Right. Which I love that's the, he says, "Blast it, they'll spook the livestock."
Yeah.
And I do love that's the fallback. There's no middle ground. There's two guys fighting in his yard, and he decides he's going to kill them both.
It's not that there's a black guy and someone who may be a member of the 1% in his backyard. The lives.
Right. No, it's just there's two maniacs fighting in his yard. So he's gonna kill them, and Mantis intervenes and disarms him, and then starts to fight Doctor Strange. And finally, Doctor Strange, this is the moment that is straight out of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Where Indiana Jones is fighting the big guy in the middle of the street and remembers he's got a gun.
Yeah, exactly.
So Doctor Strange is fighting Mantis, and the Black Panther is recovering, and they're both going to clearly kick his ass. He's like, wait, I'm the Sorcerer Supreme. I kind of forgot that.
And he easily bests them once he remembers.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite parts. It was like, oh yeah, geez. Enough of this fooling around stuff.
So yeah, the Defenders so far 2 issues into this war, they are coming out triumphant. They've got 3 pieces of the evil eye.
3-0.
The very last panel ends with Black Panther saying, because remember, Loki has tricked them into thinking the Defenders are up to no good. If the other Avengers can't reverse this trend, we are all doomed, which leads into Avengers 117. And this was my second favorite fight from this entire crossover.
Okay. Is that which one?
Well, it's right there on the cover.
Namor
versus Captain America.
Well, we before we get there, we open with a little cutaway to Dormammu and Loki, and Loki's realizing again that he definitely knows that this guy's going to screw him over, and he's really hoping that the Defenders don't win this thing. And so he starts to beg Dormammu to return his sight now, which of course doesn't happen. And then you have the fight between the Swordsman and the Valkyrie.
Right. Valkyrie wins.
Yeah, that's what we can say. Well, I also like the fact that you have the guy who's perhaps a larger sexist than Hawkeye.
Right. And she cleans his clock. For the rest of these battles, no one has actually gotten injured. Valkyrie actually injures Swordsman, like
because he's a loser.
Yeah, he's in need of medical assistance by the end of this battle.
Yeah. But how did you think that was going to end?
Exactly. And for one, I enjoyed it because first of all, I don't care for the Swordsman, and number 2, nobody tries to put Valkyrie in the corner. So yeah, she cleans his clock. They have to carry him off the battlefield. He's so wounded, and once again, the Defenders end up with another piece of the evil eye.
4-0.
Yeah, 4-0. Which then brings us to not the battle royale. That's going to be in the next issue. But like I said, my second favorite battle of the series, Captain America versus Submariner. And what you need to understand is these 2 characters have history going all the way back to World War II. They were teaming up in comics before Marvel Comics itself was even an entity.
Right.
So there's a lot of history there in that battle. Instead of punching Nazis together, they're punching each other. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I thought, when Englehart wrote his introduction, he was talking about obviously these guys have to be the ones that go up against each other.
Right.
And they should. I think it's interesting in a lot of ways, actually. Of course, I was a fan of the Invaders and all of the World War II action. But I like the fact that the history is addressed. And Namor's like, I've heard that I also always like the dialogue recaps of recent Marvel events. I have heard that you gained limited super strength recently, but my strength is unlimited. So yeah, I like that, but I also like, again, it's all playing off with the fact that these guys know each other. They worked together in the past. And then at the beginning, I love this where stand back, surface crawlers, give the captain and myself room. And Namor's clearing the way for the battle.
And then Captain America just slams him in the face with his shield.
And it's a sucker punch. It's a shield sucker punch.
Well, but Cap even reasons with himself. He's thinking to himself, Namor is one of the world's strongest beings.
Right.
Surprise and skill are my only advantages. And so he has no choice but to sucker punch him in the face with a shield.
Right.
but that doesn't work out too well for the captain.
Yep. Yep. And I also like to see Namor's got the piece of the evil eye. He's running away and he goes to dive in the water. And Cap throws his shield upside down so that Namor belly flops onto it, therefore keeping him from being entirely submerged.
Right.
And then we have the surprise, only in the Defenders, how the hell, where did this come from moment, because we've forgotten during this fight that they're actually in Japan.
Right. And Sunfire, who now, as kids in the 70s, we didn't have comic book stores. You couldn't go in and pre-order one of every Marvel title. You had to get what was at your local newsstand. And chances are your local newsstand didn't have everything. For example, I didn't have X-Men until the mid-'80s. Right. That's when my newsstand started. So, you're reading this. Sunfire shows up, the Japanese mutant who's appeared in the X-Men.
Well, and also it says who was last seen in Submariner number 54, according to the editor's note from Roy Thomas.
Right. So, once again, anybody and everybody could show up in the pages of the Defenders.
Right.
And Sunfire kind of puts a crimp in both their plans. He takes the evil eye for himself.
Right.
He says they're weary of foreigners thrusting their games upon us. Remember, this is the 70s. This is post World War II Japan.
Mm-hmm.
He decides he's going to take the evil eye for himself, and both of them can get the fuck out of his country.
Yep. Well, and again, there's this line from Sunfire. You two invaded my land for this object as if above such petty details as international boundaries. And I'm like, oh, snap. And Namor says, why? I love this, too. Namor says, why, you nationalistic moron. I won't stand for this idiocy. The Prince of Atlantis does what he pleases. So basically, it's okay to be nationalistic if your nation is Atlantis, but not if your nation is another, is not Atlantis. So it's, So then they continue to fight, and Sunfire eventually Namor punches the crap out of Sunfire, who drops his part of the evil eye, which ends up in the hands of Captain America. And then the strangest thing happens, partly because of their shared history. Right. Captain America is actually listening to what the Submariner says and is persuaded that the Defenders actually maybe are not the bad guys, and something fishy, no pun intended, is going on here. And Captain America gives Submariner his part of the evil eye and goes with him to Defenders number 10. Right.
Which, the cover to Defenders number 10 is one of my favorite Bronze Age covers.
Oh, absolutely.
It's Thor fighting Hulk. They wisely let the art do the talking. There's a surprising lack of word balloons or even, text boxes, especially when you consider the covers of that era.
Right.
They let the art speak for itself. And, wow.
I also think we should point out real quick regarding the cover. And by the way, folks, this is going to be an extra long episode.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about the cover is the little I can't even think of the word right now. The little medallions that have the faces of the characters in the upper left of the cover. This is the first time that it's more than just Hulk, Silver Surfer, Namor, or Doctor Strange. They've got all 6, including Valkyrie and Hawkeye, and they vanish in a few subsequent issues. But it's the first time we're recognizing that this is the team.
Right.
But you are right. Written by Englehart, drawn by Sal Buscema. Defenders number 10 starts with Hulk versus Thor, which I'm sure you're going to say is your favorite because it's got to be.
Absolutely. It's not only my favorite from this event crossover. It's one of my. Anytime those two fight, it's entertaining. It's a great fight. Thor swoops down, all arrogant, all full of himself. Hold, Hulk, I would have words with thee. Appeals to Hulk as a former Avenger, because people forget Hulk was an Avenger.
Right.
As one Avenger to another, I beseech thee. And Hulk interrupts him. He says, yes, Hulk was Avenger once. Didn't like it. pow, and just lays Thor out. And then Hulk goes on to say, Hulk doesn't like Defenders either. Wouldn't help them, except they help Black Knight. So, Hulk, once again, you see his loyalty.
Right.
Black Knight has not wronged him. Right. So Hulk will team up with all of these assholes just to help Black Knight. But yeah, then, the battle royale, as it were, breaks out between these two. You got a 3-panel segment where, it shows the regular humans of the Marvel Universe watching in fear, in awe, and then even in excitement. And that excitement panel is shown by 2 kids who are probably 6 or 7 years of age. That was me. And the reaction on their faces very much, mirrors mine.
Yep. And then the best thing happens. A thing that would never be done in modern comics because it's so stupid and yet so great. The Hulk grabs Thor by the cape and spins him so fast that he drills himself into the ground. But the way Buscema draws it, it's awesome.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So, there's a
it's
wonderful...
so stupid, but it's awesome.
Works. It works for that time.
Right.
The fight takes up the majority of this issue, including a wonderful, wonderful splash page halfway through the battle.
Yep. And the splash page, this is the description of what's going on here and what happens now is fantastic.
Yeah. The monster takes 2 more steps, hurling himself, reaching, his brawny arms thrust out, and are met by those of the Thunder God. Mammoth muscles snap and flex, et cetera, et cetera. You don't see that writing like that in modern comics.
Yeah, and I have to say, I loved the note at the bottom of the page. It says, special note from Steve and Sal. Of course you can use this page for a pinup, but since you'll want to save this story, maybe you should buy a second copy to cut up. No hard sell, Tiger, just a friendly tip.
Stanley,
right.
Stanley, yep.
This page is fantastic. But then we get the idea that it says 10 minutes they hold their pose, each straining futilely to break the status quo. 20 minutes they hold, 30 minutes, 1 hour. So they're basically locked in this pose of basically face to face, trying to get the upper hand for an hour before finally the entirety of the Avengers and Defenders show up and say, let's cut that crap out.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful panel. You see all the members of the Defenders, all the then current members of the Avengers, and it leads into the second part of the story, which is called United We Stand, where they all go back to Doctor Strange's house, with the Avengers in tow. No, actually, no, I'm sorry. That it's a flashback. It's when Namor and Captain America showed up at Doctor Strange's house, and everybody gets talking about what's been going on. The Defenders reveal themselves to the Avengers, say, no, Loki lied to you. We're not trying to take over the Earth. We're just, we're a superhero team, but we're not like you.
Right. Which leads to also that scene also leads, this is everything leading up to them all showing up at the fight between Thor and Hulk. It leads to another splash page that I love. And these were done in the 70s. Anytime you had one of these big groups of heroes gathering in one place, you invariably ended up with one of these pages with all of them gathered in one room talking.
Right.
And I always loved these things. I mean, I loved these moments where you'd have them all just sort of standing around in a room for some reason. Just because, I don't know, you could imagine them all being there. I don't know. It was...
Right. Oh, I agree. It was fun stuff. Yeah. But now they've shown up. They've gotten Thor and Hulk to peace. And Doctor Strange and Captain America are kind of explaining everything to Thor and Hulk. And Thor immediately, he's on board. Hulk thinks to himself, Hulk understands none of this.
Yeah.
And Doctor Strange asks Hulk for his section of the evil eye, and Hulk has had enough.
Yeah, he's definitely had enough.
Hulk fought Thunder God for a long time to keep his peace, and now stupid magician says give it up. And you see though how his devotion to Black Knight, he does eventually turn it over.
Well, it's also the nonsense. Like, he's just so Hulk is just like, Hulk is, in modern parlance, Hulk is shook. He's just like, he is done. Anyway, so yes, then of course they put all the 6 pieces of the thing together, and then Dormammu's like manifestation of magic, some weird sort of hawk face,
Asti the All-Seeing, it's one of his avatars.
Goes and steals it, and then basically the world starts to fall apart around them. And Dormammu says, "In one earthling hour, you will all be my slaves." And the Avengers and Defenders combine their forces to defy him, which of course leads to Avengers 118 to the death.
Should we, in true Bronze Age Marvel fashion, end this episode on a cliffhanger and cover that next week, or should we finish it this week? What do you think?
I don't know. Yeah, we could. Let's see. Hold on a second now. Was this the last issue of the thing, or is there? No, we have. Yeah, we can. Let's do one more. Let's do this Avengers, and then we'll pick up next week.
We'll save Defenders 11, the epilogue for next week.
Exactly.
Okay. One of the great iconic covers in Marvel history, Avengers 118, which shows all of the Defenders, all of the Avengers, face to face with Loki and the dread Dormammu to the death. And that's the title of the issue, To the Death.
And the first page is another great splash, with all these characters together. I mean, these pages that are just full of all these characters are just the greatest.
Yeah, Bob Brown on art, and just knocking it out. And the second page is a splash as well, as we start to see Dormammu's dimension imprinting on Earth. Now, a quick aside, Chris. I had forgotten that this was an element in the storyline. Did it make you think of another future Defenders story as you were reading it?
Oh yeah, you're talking about the six-fingered hand?
The conclusion of the six-fingered hand when, spoiler warning, around issue number 100, the Defenders go up against Satan. They're not fucking around with Dormammu or Zemnu the Titan anymore. They're fighting Satan.
All right, well, let's not fast forward too far.
But there's a scene where Hell is transported to Earth, and another spoiler warning. We're going to have the writer of that classic run, J.M. DeMatteis. We're going to have him here on the show when we get to his issues. We're going to interview him. But one thing we have to remember to ask him is was he inspired by the Steve Englehart run?
Yeah, we definitely have to ask that question. I want to say that one of the things to me that is a classic piece of massive event comics, like crossovers and event comics, that we see here. And again, we talk about how anybody can show up, but when the world is being changed, usually, you'd have the characters in your story are battling it. But what makes this sort of the lead-in for so many event comics to come in the future is it's not just, you see that it's affecting the wider Marvel universe, because while Dormammu's minions are invading the Earth, Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. show up.
Right.
And again, so yes, it's part of our whole theme of anybody can show up in the Defenders, but it's also it speaks toward the entirety of what comes in the future of these crossover and event comics, where it shows that what's happening here is reflected in the wider Marvel universe. We also have another character who shows up as Loki and Dormammu are having an argument about who's in charge of what. Loki is caged by Dormammu, and who shows up?
the Watcher.
Because this is a massive event comic that affects all of the Marvel Universe, and the Watcher's like, no, man, I'm just here. Why? To watch.
Now, in modern Marvel continuity, and, I admit although I write for comics, I'm not up on my modern continuity. Nick Fury is now the Watcher, correct?
He was briefly. I don't know if he still is.
Did that all change after Secret Wars redo? Maybe
I don't know. I'm not up on the current stuff either.
But it's interesting. To the best of my knowledge, this might be the first time those two characters have appeared
in the same comic.
In the same issue.
Right.
I mean, the magic of the Defenders, anybody and everybody would show up.
And then I have to say, the fight between the mindless ones and all the characters is fun, but for our purposes, what then becomes important to have in this conversation too is you get a page, you turn the page, and you get a page where you see the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man and the Inhumans and Luke Cage and Kazar and Ghost Rider and Man-Thing and Doctor Doom and Nightmare and Adam Warlock and freaking Thanos.
Yep.
All fighting back the invasion of Dormammu's dimension.
Exactly.
In different panels. It's a 11-panel page with all of those characters.
And it solidifies that during this era of comics, the Marvel Universe really was a living, breathing universe where what happened in one comic impacted all the comics. It's also interesting that, many of the characters on that page would end up becoming Defenders later on. Luke Cage,
right?
Ghost Rider, Man-Thing, Dracula. People forget Dracula ends up fighting.
Oh, I forgot that was Dracula, not Nightmare.
Yeah. So it's such a momentous page, a momentous series of panels. It's not just the heroes. You've got Doctor Doom fighting to save Latveria. I mean, this should have
impacted Thanos. Yep.
Thanos, because Titan is also getting sucked into Dormammu's dimension. But then we get back to, of course, the main characters of this clash, the Defenders and the Avengers.
Yep. And I love this. I think we're getting to the point. Look, again, this is the point at which all the dominoes fall. There's a big fight. We could go on about how Dormammu deals with each of the characters. A lot of those things are fun, but not. We don't need to talk about them. The one thing I did want to mention, which I thought was cool, is basically he raises a hand. This is all powered, by the way. His power has been amplified by the evil eye now that it's together, and he raises a hand and turns Thor back to Dr. Donald Blake and basically makes Iron Man's armor vanish. So it's Donald Blake and Tony Stark.
Right.
And then it's just the Scarlet Witch, and Dormammu bests her too. And who turns the tide, Brian Keene, against Dormammu?
Loki.
Of all people, Loki is the one who saves the day and turns the tide. Loki distracts him long enough that the Scarlet Witch is able to get a blast off. The evil eye twists around in the air, and somehow when it shines on Loki, he gets his eyesight back.
But drives him totally insane because he wasn't insane before all this.
Right. Yeah.
All those other times he tried to take over the world.
Right. Then he becomes like a total babbling, drooling, insane, screaming person. He's basically after this, he's basically Renfield from Dracula.
Exactly. And thus we come to the end of, the seminal classic Avengers Defenders War, the first big Marvel event crossover. Do we want to touch on the Watcher and the Visions conversation at the end, do you think?
Yeah, just quickly to say, I did think it was interesting that they have, the Watcher asked the Vision to explain why panic overwhelmed his computer mind. And the Vision basically says he doesn't understand it either, but we know why, because he's in love with the Scarlet Witch and she was in trouble. And then there's a speech by the Watcher. Anytime, this is a clue, friends. Pro tip, if you see the Watcher in a story, that story is going to end with the Watcher giving a gloomy speech about himself. Every time. So he says, those earthlings move so fast, searching ever for some new struggle and pausing never to savor what they see along the way as I do. Yet I must never forget that it was they who saved their dimension. All I save are memories of their doing it, which an aside, is Mark from the musical Rent. Like, he's the guy who films everything but never does anything.
If you, like me, see the Watcher as the Marvel Universe's peeping Tom, then the line of all I save are memories of their doing it takes on extra creepy.
Whole new meaning. And then he goes on to say, and that is why I treasure them, why they are human, and why I am only the Watcher. Yeah. Anyway, on that note, we will come back next week.
Oh, next week, folks. All right. First of all, we get the resolution to the Black Knight storyline. It's an epilogue to the Avengers Defenders War. Zemnu the Titan comes back. We covered him in a previous episode. But then we lead into two very important Defenders events. First of all, the first appearance in the series of Nighthawk, who is going to go on to, we've said Hulk is the heart of the series. We said when Hulk leaves, Gargoyle kind of becomes that heart. But to me, the main two characters in the Defenders have always been Valkyrie and Nighthawk. So We're going to see Nighthawk's first appearance. We're also going to see, Chris, I don't know about you, but one of my favorite Defenders villains, one of the best members of their rogues gallery, Nebulon the Celestial Man. This will be his first appearance in the book. So we will get to those next week.
You can't get more 70s than that.
No, you can't. Just want to remind folks, if you enjoy our show, Chris, along with his co-hosts Jim Moore and Jonathan Mayberry, can be heard every week here on the Project Entertainment Network on Three Guys with Beards. You got anything coming up you want to tell them about that? Plug it?
No, just keep listening. Jonathan Mayberry's been traveling a bit, so we're calling him the Traveling Mayberry, and we've had a couple of substitute co-hosts while he's been gone.
Yeah, you even had Tim Levin sitting in for Jonathan.
I know, we're slumming now. We're having Welsh people. Come on.
And of course, my show also here on the Project Entertainment Network, the Horror Show with Brian Keene, because, I am enough of a Tony Stark that I've got to have my name in the fucking title. And we thank you for continuing to listen to Defenders Dialogue, which is, of course, available on iTunes, Android, iHeartRadio, Roku, Stitcher, Google Play Music, and all other platforms via the Project Entertainment Network. Our engineer is Mr. Tommy Clark. Please do us a favor. Check out Tommy's podcast, The Necrocasticon. That's also available here on the Project Entertainment Network as well. And one more time, thanks to Night Moves, the new short story collection by the Queen of Cosmic Horror and the Queen of My Life, Mary Sangiovanni. It features 7 short stories and 2 novellas by the author Cemetery Dance calls one of the finest purveyors of weird horror in the business. Night Moves is available right now in paperback and ebook. Chris, you got anything else to say?
Only to thank everybody for listening to Defenders Dialogue and to promise that we will not go over time next week.
We'll try not to. I may have things to say about Nebulon.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
May I have your attention for the morning announcements? Please be advised the Lunch Ladies Book Club is coming to Project Entertainment Network. Join Shelley, Mimsy, and Ashley as they dish out a deep review of a book. Horror. Thrillers. Whatever they want to read and review. A blonde, a brunette, and a redhead walk into a bookstore and they're serving up hot book reviews. The Lunch Ladies Book Club? Coming soon, exclusively on Project Entertainment Network. Would you now stand for the national anthem?
Don't get your lunch money stolen!
This has been an exclusive presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.